Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the BDN Content Podcast. I'm Brian Nibley, and today I want to talk about Bitcoin and the M2 global money supply, among other things. But first, I want to talk about crypto exchanges. And if you're thinking about buying crypto, you're new into Bitcoin, or just looking for a new exchange, I mentioned a few in the past that I like. And some of the important things to look for include security, of course. You need an exchange with a good track record of being secure and not having a history of hacks or mass phishing attacks or anything like that. Number two, transparency and compliance. You need to make sure the exchange is compliant with all rules and regulations and that they disclose important info on their team and everything about how the exchange operates, that they're not over leveraged or anything like that, because we've seen so many catastrophes in the past. And finally, the user experience. Of course, you want something that's easy to use and user friendly, and some exchanges can be kind of technical and kind of complicated. And one exchange that fits all of these perfectly is Kraken. They're one of the largest US based exchanges. They've been around since 2011, which is longer than most all exchanges. And yeah, they take security seriously. They have a very good track record, very great user reviews. They also have a great education section on their website, which is another thing that can be very helpful for beginners, of course, for anyone, really. Sometimes when I do research for different articles and stuff, I wind up citing Kraken's Learn section. And yeah, there's a lot of really good resources there. Highly recommend Kraken. There will be a link to sign up for a new account in the description of this video in this podcast. So I want to talk about the recent dip in Bitcoin. The dollar price went from a new all-time high just days ago, 112,000 I think it was. Now it's down to 105, 104,000, and nothing has really changed. It's just profit taking. It's a typical bullish retest of a previous support level. This happens all the time, and it's a lot less dramatic than the one that came before it, right? Going from 108,000 to 78,000 or so seemed like mass panic. The fear and greed index bottomed out. It was the worst since 2020, and that was just unbelievable. I've talked about that before as well. And if the price goes beneath 100,000, we'll probably have a similar type of panic out there. But these are all just short-term corrections in a bull market that is entirely normal. And anyone who sold, not just Bitcoin, but other financial assets as well, sold at or near the bottom in April of this year, which is not even 6-7 weeks ago, then they lost quite a bit compared to if they would have just held. So with most assets, trying to time the market is generally a fool's errand. Maybe for some people, some of the time that works out. You typically need a whole lot of information, a lot of patience and emotional control to have any success in that type of short-term trading. It's really less than 1% of people who are profitable when trading on a short-term basis, like day traders or swing traders. However, I do believe that the majority of people can learn to invest and quote-unquote trade profitably if they take a longer time span. For example, 3 months to 3 years or a lot more. I always recommend 4 years or more for Bitcoin, although, disclaimer, this is not financial advice. Nothing I say here is financial advice. This is just my opinion, and I'm just some guy who talks and writes about this stuff, really. I've been around for 12 years now, but I have no finance education formally. High school economics is all I took, which is a lot more than a lot of people. You'd be surprised. Most people don't seem to even understand or remember the very basics of economics, which provides a great foundation for understanding the value of different things. Speaking of the value of things, the biggest factor influencing Bitcoin's price is the global M2 money supply. And that can be broken down further into the money supply of each individual currency from each nation and their central bank, and that tends to impact the price in that local currency. But global M2 really affects the dollar price and the price of all currencies overall. So that is basically a straight up and to the right line for the next couple months. When you adjust backwards, when you overlay the Bitcoin price and M2 with a lag of several months, there's different time frames people do it on. If you check out the YouTube channels of somebody like Colin Talks Crypto or Benjamin Cohen, they do a lot of really brilliant technical analysis and show these charts with global M2 overlaid on Bitcoin and US dollars. And depending on how long the lag time is, this can be more or less predictive of the price almost perfectly. I think the most accurate is 68 days or 78 days, something like that, somewhere between 2 and 3 months. And so for the past several months, global M2 has shot up, and the Bitcoin price has only recently begun to react to that. And there are short-term variations in that. It's not straight up and to the right in a straight line, but the trend is like that. And the price of Bitcoin follows that pretty perfectly, definitely more so than any other metric you could possibly look at. And so that would indicate, if that thesis is true, that would indicate that we still have 2 months or so until another local peak. And then in all likelihood, August and September are historically the worst months of the year for Bitcoin in terms of seasonality. So there'll probably be a correction around then before a typical blow-off top would be October through December. It could even extend into January of next year, maybe longer, who knows. This cycle could easily be different than all the previous ones because the whole market is so different. Corporations adopting, institutions, nation states even. And my own prediction that I've stated elsewhere is 300,000 US dollars per Bitcoin by November or so of this year. That could be wrong in terms of the timing or the number or both. But based on previous cycles, that's a reasonable prediction, as I explained in an article for BitcoinNews.com back in January of 2024, I believe it was. So anyway, we've got companies adopting Bitcoin at a rapid pace now. I was talking to somebody at a conference last October, crypto conference here in Salt Lake City, and I mentioned at one point, I wonder how many companies are adopting MicroStrategy's playbook and preparing to adopt a Bitcoin treasury strategy. And this person just wrote it off. I can't remember exactly what they said, but they basically just said, I don't think it's that many. I mean, who's going to do that? And, well, I guess there's that one company, Similar Scientific, the one in Japan. She's like, well, there's that one, but I don't think anybody else is going to do it. And of course, here we are, 8 months later or so, and hundreds of companies are now doing this. So, lesson there is, don't listen to people at crypto conferences. I'm kidding. I don't know what the lesson there is. It's really not. It's just that don't tell people they're wrong, I guess. Even when you know for 100% certain they're wrong. If it's somebody you just met and it's a polite conversation and context, then there's no need to go into exquisite detail about why they're wrong and they don't know what they're talking about. But that's a different subject. So with all these corporations adopting, it has brought up concerns about the risk of so much supply being centralized and all this leverage in the system. People are saying MicroStrategy could be the next FTX, things like that. And I saw an interesting Twitter post just today about this topic, about how once MicroStrategy's net asset MNAV goes beneath 1, then it's all going to come undone, and the insiders are going to sell all their shares, and all the stock prices of Bitcoin treasury companies are going to crater towards zero, and then the price of Bitcoin is going to collapse, and just all the stuff. And it was just a few short paragraphs explaining something that is super complicated, and no one can predict with absolute certainty how it's going to play out. So I did an interesting thing, and I asked Grok AI to assign a probability of 0 to 100 of the first. I asked it to analyze the post, and then in response to that, I asked it to assign a probability. And long story short, it came up with 15% at the end. 15% chance that would actually happen the way this person described, based on a whole bunch of things. I mean, it wrote a couple pages of analyzing all the factors, and I think that's probably as accurate as it gets. 15 to 20% chance that that risk is real and it could happen, but there's at least an 80% chance that nothing like that is going to happen, because it requires several things to happen all at once. Could MicroStrategy run into trouble and their stock tanks? Absolutely. Does that mean that it's going to spark a contagion and every company that holds Bitcoin is going to tank, and then Bitcoin's also going to get destroyed? Like, the more steps you add, the less likely something becomes, because the conditions have to be just right. So, in my opinion, those fears are overblown. However, I do believe there are some legitimate concerns around different issues in Bitcoin that I won't get into in too much detail here right now, because I've made videos on the subject recently. One is called How I Would Destroy Bitcoin, where I talk about how I would attack the centralization, the code base, and the security. And a lot of that comes down to the developers and the mining, and we're already seeing some things happen around that, to that end, sort of. I don't think it's a real threat right now, but it's a real concern to think about, that people should have on their radars. I mean, mining is highly centralized, and most concerning thing of all is the developers and what's been going on there. It's another thing I'm not going to go into exquisite detail about, because I made several videos on that subject, and they've done really well. I'm glad you guys like them. And maybe I'll make another one as things develop. But for now, I'm kind of getting over that subject, although I'm sure I'm not done talking about it, because it is very important, and there's not enough people speaking about it, in my opinion, and in other people's opinion. And I've received a lot of positive feedback and encouraging comments from people on YouTube and LinkedIn, saying they appreciate my input, and encouraging me to continue speaking on the matter. So I will do that when the time is right. However, I don't believe that right now is that time. So I think that's going to wrap up the Bitcoin part of the conversation for now. I also want to mention really quickly just a few of my thoughts on AI content creation and the future of work, sort of, because this is something I've been thinking a lot lately. And you may have heard this phrase that, AI won't take your job, but someone who knows how to use AI will. Actually, that's not entirely true. It's half true, because right now, today, that may be what's happening in a lot of sectors, a lot of industries, where companies are downsizing. Maybe they had a team of 5 people doing something. Now they just have one person using AI to be even more efficient than those 5 people were. That means fewer contractors and part-time employees, and for every 5 jobs eliminated, maybe 1 or 2 get created. So that's another myth that people talk about. Well, yeah, AI will eliminate jobs, but it'll create new ones too. Yeah, that might be true, but not in a proportionate manner. In my opinion, just based off everything I've read and seen and experienced, it's something in the ballpark of like 5 to 1 right now, and that may increase dramatically. So for every 5 jobs eliminated, there may be one new one created thanks to AI. But over time, that could go 10 to 1, 100 to 1, and so on. So it is going to be a serious problem at some point. And I've been a skeptic for a long time. I've voiced my criticisms of, having worked with large language models and stuff. I've seen the flaws, and they can be difficult to work with, and you can't really get a human-like output most of the time. But now they are starting to improve. There's definitely been a lot of improvement in the last 2 years, even though the rate of improvement has slowed because these models have less original human content to work with. They don't have the ability to improve as quickly necessarily. But that isn't, so that's created a bottleneck. It hasn't created a downward spiral of destruction, it seems. And I learned something this week that totally changed my opinion on all this. I've been slowly reforming an opinion over the last several months, but just the other day, I had a demo of a agency or program, whatever you want to call it, that's just a handful of AI agents that do everything for you, basically, from a marketing perspective. And how it works, basically, is there's one agent for, say, coming up with ideas for things, and then it goes to another agent for drafting content, creating, emails and social media posts and whatnot. And then that goes to another agent that edits and refines the stuff, makes sure it's on brand. And then it goes to another agent that finalizes everything and actually posts it or sends the email and all of that. And if all these agents are, as good as the best large language models today, and you can fine tune them to exactly your voice and your purpose, then you can have just a one-click solution for a whole marketing campaign, basically. And I'll talk about that more as time goes on, because I'm very interested in this, and I'm talking to the CEO and founder of this company because I want to use this, and I'm sure a lot of other people do too. It just hasn't really taken off yet. This is still a very new thing, a new company. And again, I was skeptical of AI agents. I was just thinking maybe one agent by itself could do some things like post comments on social media and whatever, and that is one possibility. I mean, this program has an agent that will respond to your YouTube comments, for example, and just say, "Oh, this is Brian's assistant," and it'll make a short, quick comment. And if it's not on brand with your voice, then people know it wasn't exactly you. So, and that was always one of my doubts about the thing, is that, well, if AI is speaking for me, so to speak, what if I don't like what it says? And this is all just automated, so how do I know it's going to be okay? But it turns out they can learn over time, and if there's mistakes in the beginning, you can correct it and train them until you basically, you have a clone of yourself, basically. You have like multiple clones of yourself doing specific things and working together. And it is really revolutionary. It's crazy to think how many industries it's going to disrupt and how many jobs it's going to completely eliminate, not just change, but there's places where you have entire teams of professionals where now you just need one person leading a team of bots who can do everything. Maybe 2 people to make things faster, but yeah, there's not going to be huge teams doing these things. And we're just talking about marketing stuff. If you look at video production, for example, in terms of Hollywood, there's new AI software, text to video prompt software that came out recently. I can't remember the name. I haven't looked into it that much. I just saw a few clips about it. That can create an entire advertisement, a 30-second advertisement about anything, and it's almost indistinguishable from reality. I mean, it's a lot better than, Sora or the other text to video AI generators of the last year or two. So that has developed quite rapidly. And at some point in the future, there won't be any need for everyone who works on the set of, advertising shoots. The the producer, director, writer, actors, all of them will have less work going forward as production studios adopt this technology. I mean, think about that. You used to have a whole studio with all these employees doing all this work to create one minute long ad for a pharmaceutical product, for soda, a food product, anything you can imagine. And now none of that is needed. But it's so new that it'll take years for people to adopt that, right? Because most people don't even know it exists. But once the people at these companies figure out, oh hey, we don't need any of this anymore. We can just use this one program, and it costs $20 a month, even if it's $200 a month or $2,000 a month. That'll still be so much less than what they were spending. And maybe they have one person that specializes in prompting it and another person who finalizes the outcome, and that's it. Those two people replace entire teams just like that. And it just takes time for that to manifest. We're on that path. The first step has been taken. Just like it took a few years for people to really adopt ChatGPT and other large language models, it took a while for people to. Everyone knew they existed pretty quickly, right? And a lot of people started using them in some way or another. But it took a year or two for people and organizations to really integrate that into their workflow to where it reduced the need for certain types of jobs. So that's pretty much it. That's all I've got to say for today. I thank you for tuning in if you made it this far. And again, there'll be a link in the description for Kraken. So go ahead and sign up if you're interested in using one of the best, most secure crypto exchanges out there. And I'll see you next time.